All right, hey everyone. Welcome back to lunch. So this afternoon, we're going to be taking our React app and giving it front-end routes in much the way that we gave Trip Planner some front-end routes when we did that. That feels like a long time ago, but I think it was just like 5 days ago. So think back to that time, and can anyone tell me what is the difference between these routes, front-end routes, and back-end routes?
Back-end routes will be basically fetch the data.
Will be
Basically to fetch the data, what data exactly function is will be routing to that thing, and the front end will be routing to the next page or the HTML or whatever will be seen on the front side of it.
yeah. So typically in the single page apps that we build here, for the most part, backend routes serve API data, so they'll serve things in JSON. There are some backend routes that don't serve API data, like which ones predominantly? There has to be at least one, right? Because eventually the HTML gets served. Post, well, I guess post will often not return anything, or it'll return a redirect. So there's that. But there's some that return HTML. Was that star? Yeah, so like all of them except for the API routes return index.html, which is, this is not the absolute best or most performant way to build an app, I have to say, because it means that, again, you are serving the same thing, the same content for every single request from the server. And that makes our lives as developers easier, because it's like, okay, what happens when our app starts? Always exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter what URL you're going to, you always get the same JavaScript, the same bundle, and the same, like, basically empty page. Like, this index.html is basically the same index.html as any of yours, or is the one in Juke, or it basically never changes. Probably it should have a title in it or something. This is Emojilicious. But it doesn't contain any content. Facebook, the people who made React, don't do things this way. They actually don't. Facebook.com is not a single page app. There's a lot of stuff that gets rendered on the server based on what URL you're going to. And some of that is like legacy, and some of that is because they want to actually serve different content. They want to serve the content that you requested from the URL that you requested. And so in Facebook setup, the server knows about all of these front-end routes. Like right now, we have no front-end routes, but eventually we will have like /smiling face, maybe /emoji that's fine. And that will, and in a non-single page app setup, the server will know about this. Whereas in a single page app, the way we built them, only the front end knows about these front end routes, which is kind of the answer to my next question, but that's all right. So like, where do we define our backend routes? Yeah, so somewhere in our server. Eventually, they get attached to our Express app. So in this case, oh, this is kind of big. In this little example, we have some front-end routes here. We have this images route, which serves all of the emoji images. We have API, which serves a bunch of API routes that will probably be kind of familiar, like find all the emoji. Post, get a single emoji, post a comment on an emoji, sort of the kind of API routes that we've been working with for most of this program. And then where do front-end routes go? What's that? Yeah, somewhere on the client, and this is kind of a trick question because we don't know yet. That's the subject of today's lecture. or we kind of know, right? We know from Trip Planner that we'll probably be using the history API. So at some point, either us or some library we're using will be like history dot push state or something. Oops, 2 arguments required, only 1 present. I don't remember what the arguments are. No, that wasn't it. Yeah, I don't exactly remember why that didn't change the URL. Anyway, there's this whole API here. Is it replace state? Shouldn't this be updating the URL bar when I do this? Okay. Unclear to me why this isn't changing, but regardless, oh, because I've entered something in here. No, still not happening. Anyway, there's a whole API for it. We don't have to remember what it is because we're about to learn React Router, which interfaces with the history API and gives us the ability to sort of declaratively name front-end routes in much the way that we can declaratively name our back-end routes. So let's just walk through doing that. And let me first show you this like little demo project. Not gonna look at that. We're going to look at this. Okay, so basically this is the whole project. There's like we'll start from the top of the front end. So we have our index.js on the client side pulls in React and Axios and doesn't actually need Axios now that oh, it does for this. I was putting it on the window just so that I could use it in the console. I think I don't need that anymore. And then we render this component, the emojis component. The emojis component goes and fetches data from this API endpoint and renders a list of emojis. And this is the list of emojis. And there's some styling on it that makes them, kind of cool. If we go and look at the data we're rendering, it's API emoji singular. Takes a second, and then we can see that for each emoji, we've got the actual emoji as a string, and description, and name, and an image URL for it, which we're actually not using here. These are just text, but we will on the next page. And the page I want to add to this is like right now, when I click on these, nothing whatsoever happens, which is like kind of super unfortunate. What would be nice is if it took me to a page that showed me like information about this emoji. Like I think there actually is an Emojipedia that has sort of detailed information about each emoji. Yeah, here we go. It shows you how it's rendered. Wow, I should have picked a different emoji. That is shaped like soft serve ice cream. This is like actually part of the description. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna add a single emoji view page, something for this to link to when I click on it. So first we're gonna install React Router, which is the package we're going to use to let us do that. So say React Router DOM is actually, React Router comes in many flavors. There's like a React Router for React Native. There's a React Router for React VR. There's probably a React Router for, I can't think of, what are the other things? React AR, React on your Nokia 7520. React Router DOM is for the web. So we can install that. And then we can begin to ponder how to use it, because they've changed versions so many times, I can just never quite remember. So let's take a look. Oh look, a little demo right on their NPM page. That's perfect. So it says, import everything from React Router DOM. And then how do I use it? Nobody knows. Let's see if we can infer just from their names. Okay. So I think, I think the way React Router usually works is we go into the top of our app. In some cases, you'll see this happen like slightly lower in our app, but we have such a simple app that it makes sense to do it here. And we're going to first wrap everything in the router. So I guess first we're going to import the router. Import browser router as router from React Router DOM. And then I can say router Why do you want to indent that much? That's like really aggressive. Space is 8. Who told you that? Ah, that's better. Okay, and so everything wrapped in the router is going to be in some sense controlled by the router. The router will this router element will look at the URL bar and sort of watch it as it changes, and then provide for the entire component tree information about what the current URL is, which we can then use some other React Router components to decide what to render. Web native anywhere. We are on the web. Here are some things we don't care about. Okay, cool. This looks right. So this is what we just did. We just pulled in browser router from React Router DOM. We renamed it. We said browser router as router, which is something you can do within import statements. And you'll often see this one. I think Juke might even do it this way. And then, so first we wrap our app in this, and then we can have these route components which describe front-end routes. Which means that, for example, we could say route path is / and then for that path, render the component emojis. So we can replace this, which says like always render the emojis component, and instead have a route which is going to render this component only when the path is /. So now what happens if I... Okay. So it didn't obviously work because I can still go... Oh, sorry, I think I've got to say route exact path. Otherwise, it just matches the beginning of the path, which will always start with /. Yeah, so now if I go to any path except just the root, it renders nothing. Which I think might be fine. Maybe we'll want to have like some sort of like, oh, sorry, that emoji wasn't found. Let me redirect you to the main page. But for now, we're going to want to have another path that's like, okay, for the name of some emoji, you should go to the single emoji page. And I think to do that, we need to add one more thing, which is a switch. So React Router has this sort of odd but common requirement that router have exactly one child. This was very common for React components, and I think it's about to become a little bit less common because of some architectural changes within React. But the short of this is, like, if you want to have multiple routes, you can either wrap them all in like a div. You can wrap them all in a react.fragment, which is kind of like a div, only it doesn't generate anything on the page. It's just like a list of components to render. Or in this case, we're going to wrap it in a switch, which is another React Router component that says, hey, match exactly one of my child routes. So now I can say route path equals, and then slash emoji name. How about just, maybe just emoji? Oh, how about just name? And then component will be single emoji. One emoji. How about that? Which then we have to import. Is emojis too big as a file? Yeah, sure. Okay, so now if we let's just make a simple component here. Export default. Hi. Okay, so our main page still works, but now if we go to any other route, like /foo, we get this component. Okay, so any questions about this so far? We've wrapped our app in a router, and then added a switch, which is going to pick between one of these routes. If we had more routes, it would pick the first one that matches the current URL. As many as you would like. Billions and billions. Maybe not billions, I don't know. At some point something will go, but as many as you could sensibly imagine. Yeah, good question. So without the switch, I think the whole thing is going to barf. Well, like really. I mean, maybe it won't. Maybe it's just going to work and I'll have learned something. No. So it complains saying a router may have only one child element, which I think if we go look at it, it happens because...
Oh, sorry, if you put it in a div, but it had this.
Oh, sure. If you put it in a div, I think it'll work fine. But it's possible for it to match both of these. In fact, I think both of these will match on the main page. So let's see. Let's watch that. Okay, so that's not the main page. If I go to the main page, it's fine. So with the way our routes are laid out, I think this ends up being fine. But it's not the same behavior because a switch will pick only one of its children, and this div will, I believe, be rendering all of the ones that match. So we can check that again by saying render this component, hello there, when we match slash, which I think will always match thing. Let's find out. Okay, so hello there is happening now, and then if we go to somewhere else, then we see both this route and this route rendering, which might be fine. Maybe you want that, but if you don't want that, that's what switch is for. So this should now just render the hi, I think, yeah. Because it finds this, the switch goes and looks, tries to match this route, it sees the route does match, and it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to render the other.
So if you have that exact path and you have different divs, it would have not break, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And let's change this to... So a fragment is kind of a newer feature in React, and all it is it's like wrapping it all in a div, only it doesn't generate a div on the page. Which is kind of nice because the de facto way of returning a bunch of elements in React has been to wrap them all in a div. which means you sometimes get like layers and layers of divs that are actually kind of pointless, that were just used to group elements within the code. So fragments do not have that problem. Fragments, the renderer like knows how to eliminate them. And I think we're going to see all, actually, well, let's just see. I think we're going to see all three of these. Expected a string that got undefined. Maybe fragments are not available yet in whatever version I have installed. Never mind, carry on. You will be excited at some point in the future when you can use them. Yeah, so here, hi, hello there, and then all of the emoji. So I think for our purposes, we want the switch behavior. I'm going to suggest generally that you probably want switch behavior unless you know you don't. Like in some cases, you, like for example, in a nav bar, you might want, like actually, let's see, if I had a div here and a nav bar here, here I might want some routes that display like based on where I am, regardless of what's happening with other parts of the nav bar. I can't think of what they are right now, so it's not a great example, but there's basically use cases for both ways of handling routes. Front-end routes are a little bit more flexible than back-end routes. With express routes, you kind of know, like, okay, I am going to, like, when I match this path, I'm going to run this set of handlers, and that's it. The way React Router is set up, you can kind of, anywhere in your app, you can add a route tag and a little bit of extra information that you'll see in the workshop, and decide what to render in that page based on what the URL bar is, which is useful because sometimes you want, for example, maybe you want the logout link to not render in the nav bar when you are actually on the login page because it's like nonsensical. So for example, any content I put in here is going to always render no matter what. Yeah, no, this is right. And I'm going to get rid of that because we don't need anything so complex right now. Okay, so we've added a path, or we've added a route that gets us to the single emoji page. And here it is. Now it would be nice to figure out what this name was. So when I said the path for this route is :name, much like with Express, this becomes a parameter which we can get at inside the component. So if we look at the one emoji component, this is actually receiving props. And the router is going to pass in props that include this piece of the URL, basically that include this name. And I never remember how it prints those, so I'm just going to print all of my props and we can see what we get. And the way I'm going to do this is through this little recipe where I stringify all of the props and as JSON and put them inside a pre-tag, which should mean that I get to see it. These are all of the props that my component has received. I'm only doing this to debug. And there are other ways I could have debugged this. Like I could have gone into the React DevTools. This is arguably the better way of doing it. And drilled down until I saw my component. So here's my, my unknown component, and then looked at the props it's receiving, which are, these are displaying the same data. This is actually, the React Dev tools are showing it in a more complete way. Because apparently I can be like, I can receive history here and call history.push. And I can also look at, let's see, match params name. So if I just say display props.match params name, I'll get whatever I typed here. Okay, questions about this? Where we're going? Feel free to stop me if you want to see, yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, this is the, oh yeah, we're not, this is the div we're rendering into, and really it should probably be document.getElement by ID main. I think that was working because elements are available as global variables by their ID by default. This is not great practice to rely on. Okay, so let's make this single emoji page. It'll be not a very complex page in terms of design. And it's going to do the same sort of song and dance we do over here in the emoji component, where when we mount, we're going to fetch API emoji, and then I think we want this, which will be the emoji name. Let's just make sure that's appropriate. Return this.props.match.name. Okay. Let me just make sure the API supports this. So /API emoji smiling face has got to be an emoji. Emojis plural, maybe. Smiling pile of poo. Okay, let's go look at my backend and make sure that I support this single emoji route correctly. So I'll look at API.js. So when I get /emoji name, send the emoji. That seems like it should be okay. Maybe I'm... What's that? This props.match. Oh, good call. But right now I'm just hitting the API route, which means I should be seeing something, I would think. Here, let's try doing this with curl. Okay, we're getting nothing. API emoji. If we just fetch API emoji, do we see stuff? We do. We see a lot of stuff. So let's see. Is the server printing an error? Where am I even running this? Where is my mind? So I've got, here's the terminal where I'm running stuff. So it is saying, okay, so it's running the select, it's just not finding it. Maybe it's not underscores. Let me look at my database. Oh yeah, okay, so it's got spaces rather than underscores. So if I just say emojis smiling pile of poo with spaces, no, still no. Oh, they do have underscores. So how about innocent? Maybe I'm just typing the wrong thing. Oh, there's one. What about cowboy hat face? Maybe it's like smiling pile of poop or something. Oh, okay. So this is fine. I'm doing the right thing. Which means this should work. If I go to slash, instead of slash API emoji cowboy hat face, if I just go to cowboy hat face, then I'll see nothing whatsoever. Nothing was returned from render because it should be this.props.match.params name. Cowboy hat face. Okay, so we'll do this little dance where, like, if our state isn't set, return loading. Oh. Please don't return a string of HTML. That's not acceptable. Okay. Oh, and then otherwise we should return, let's just return the image of the emoji. So it'll be, well, we can do a little more. How about we'll get the emoji name, maybe the emoji description, and then also the image. So the source will be emoji.image source. Okay, great. So it loaded. I think I'm screwing up the images slightly, so let's take a look at that. If I go into the React DevTools, I can see that this image has no props, which is kind of deeply confusing. Let's actually look at the state of my emoji component, because that'll have everything I got. Oh, it's image underscore URL, not SRC. Oh, there. Hey. 100 points. Oh, I guess this doesn't do anything useful if it can't find the emoji, but, you know. Okay, so we'll deal with the not found issue later. But for now, let's figure out how to link our emoji catalog with those single emoji pages. Any questions before we move on to that? Okay, so in order to make these into links, we are going to use one more component from React Router. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you were saying how that when you write the router, you were like, you have a component of the single emoji thing. So this written in that separate
Oh, yes, this is.
Is that affecting the state in the main thing, or is this not state?
No, this is just the state of this single emoji component, which is like this component. So if we go and look at the router So we've got the one emoji component, which has its own state. And then if we go back here, I don't know why it reloaded the page necessarily, but we'll see a different component, which is the like many emoji component, which has its own state, which is this giant array of emoji.
So if it's a class that has a state, even if you haven't like specified what the state is, I think in what we were looking for, we were like saying this state is this object, but this like you can use set state even if you haven't written the state.
Oh yeah. State just starts with null.
It's just there.
Yeah. Which is actually why we can do this, where this state starts empty, and so in our render we ask, hey, is there a state for this component? Has set state been called yet? And if it hasn't, we return that we're loading still, because presumably this has not come back. Yeah. And we should have like slightly more sophisticated state handling for this. Like in particular, we should probably catch an error and say this dot set state error. And then render the error here. So like if this dot error return. Oh, sorry. This dot state dot error. Which actually, that might handle this case where we go to an emoji that doesn't exist. Or not. Why? One emoji. Interesting. I guess. Oh, I know the problem. The server, if it can't find anything, is not bailing out. So what we should probably do is, if not emoji, then we could not find the emoji. Oops. Okay, so and then we should fail with an error. Okay, cool. I think. Yeah, that sounds right. And then if we go here, it still doesn't work. Because it hates us. Oh, I think this needs to be a message. Oh, great. So that's an example of taking an error that's happening in the back end and wiring it through the front end. You catch the error off your Axios request, put it on state, and then you can check if we failed and render that before rendering anything else. I personally like this pattern of basically checking the various problems you can have. Like, are we still loading? Then like return that we're loading. Did we fail? Then return that we failed. Otherwise, like render the whole thing. I feel like it's easier to reason about than having a lot of like this dot state and blah 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 stuff in here. Okay, so 100. Okay, 100 points still works. Okay, last thing, linking. So when I click on this, nothing happens. Instead, what I want is for it to go to the appropriate route. We can use a component from React Router DOM to do this. It's going to be here. Who wants to guess what that component will be called? Anyone? Yeah, good guess. It's link. That's it. Just like Zelda. Okay, and link has a pretty simple interface. You say link to, and then the route you want to link to. So in this case, I think we want to link to the emoji name. That's basically what we told it to be. Or it depends on how we set up our routes, and I think that's how we set it up. Like this name will be the appropriate route. And I think that's it. Let's see. Oh no, everything broke. That's so surprising. Cannot read property path name. Okay, let's fix this. Render key emoji. Oh. Cannot read property path name if undefined. Why do you suppose that is? It can't render the link. Maybe it's not linked to? Let's find out. Link to dashboard. That seems right. Oh, I see. I should do this. I was destructuring the emoji string out of this itself. I should instead make this emoji.emoji. And then this will be the name, and this will be the name. Yeah, so what was happening is that I was looping through each of these. God, okay, it's really confusing to pick a data model where the singular and plural are the same. But I was looping through each of these emoji data structures and plucking the emoji property from it instead of just using the whole thing. So I didn't have access to the name property. Now I do because I'm not destructuring it. So this should be what I want. Oh, great. They're really ugly, but they're links. And if I click on it, oh, hey. No. Woman walking. Yeah, it's like sort of ambling along, right? Oh. Do we have elves here yet? Oh, I can't search. That's like a feature tab another day. Romania. Okay, so to review, what did we do to get front-end apps or front-end routes in this app? We wrapped our whole app in a router, specifically in a browser router, which is going to use the browser history in order to give us front-end routes. We somewhere in our app, in this case, like right at the top, but in Juke it'll be a little bit further down, I think. We created a switch which will switch between different components based on the current route. We added a one emoji component which goes and loads the data for a single emoji and then displays a honestly pretty underwhelming page about that emoji, but hey, more things can go there. And then finally, we linked our, what do you call this? Our emoji catalog items to the routes, the single emoji routes we created with this link component, also from React Router. Yeah, I think in Juke they you can basically choose where you install the router in your app hierarchy. Usually it's like quite near the top. It doesn't have to be the very top. It's just anything above it isn't going to get routed. It'll just always be on every page. So like if I did this, I'm just always here. Then basically this is the only part of the app that like cares about the router, that cares about the current URL. What's that? Oh yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Yeah, and you can kind of tell that these are pretty fast loads. Like it's not refreshing the whole page to do these navigations. Potato. Oh no. I'm just here. I'm a potato. All right. Any other questions? Is this the extent of it? Oh, I think there's one more thing we might want to do. I don't remember. Okay, I can't think of a great place to do this. Maybe let's do this. Let's say that if we visit, yeah, this is actually a good place to do that. Right now, if I go to some emoji that does not exist, I get this like error, which is fine, maybe even better than what we're about to do. But let's say that instead of showing this error, we just wanted to redirect to the main page. So if we wanted to do that, then we would have to take something off the router, namely the history object, and call push state, or just push on it. Wait. Let's go look. So in the React DevTools, if we snipe this component, really? There we go. We can go see the props we're receiving from the router, which is actually quite a few of them. And one of them is history, which we can call push, history.push. We'll basically do the equivalent of following a link. It'll add an entry to the browser's history, and it'll go there. So what we can say is, if an error occurred while fetching this emoji, instead of setting the error on state, we're going to call this.props.history.push to the main page. So now when I reload this, it's going to immediately take me back there. But if I go to a normal thing that exists, it fails in some other weird way. What? Smiling face. Huh. Yeah, so that's one thing I should fix. Let's just fix that. And emojis, this should be emoji ID. What was the one that failed? Was it this one? I don't know. It seems fine now. And if I go somewhere this emoji doesn't exist, then it just sends me back. And so that's how you handle, like, I need to do some operation, usually like some AJAX call, and then redirect. That's how you do it with React Router. And then so you'll notice that we are getting a lot of components from the router. So when we look at, a lot of props from the router. So when we look at our emoji component, it's getting history, location, and match, which are all sent in by the router. So we aren't and really can't send in additional props here, but the router is doing that. And it only does that for components that are mounted directly under it. You'll see in the workshop that if you want to, for example, call history.push in some deeper component, you have to do something to it in order to be able to get those props. You have to wrap it in a with router call, which the workshop will walk you through doing. Okay. Any last questions before we jump into the workshop? Okay, cool. I will workshop, make these slides available, make this video available, and good luck.